All right, cool. Well, welcome everyone. Alex and I are stoked to see the turnout continue to increase and the interest in what we're talking about. We want to continue to bring value to you guys. And I know I get a lot is healthcare professionals who are wanting to invest in real estate and wanting to do it through their retirement accounts because it's such a huge, fascinating topic because people don't even realize you can do it. And when you start realizing that it's possible and it's actually a lot easier than you think, and you get a lot better returns in the stock market, and you can use it to invest in real estate syndications and other strategies. So huge interest into it. We're super stoked to have Brian here. He's an expert in it. He has a presentation prepared for everyone. I know we will probably have a lot of questions. So Brian, I don't know if you want to take them throughout the presentation or you want to save them for the end.
I can take them throughout. Probably the easiest way for people to either put their hands up or put it in the question tab.
Okay, perfect. Yes. So you all heard him. Drop your questions in the chat, or there is a feature to raise your hand on here. And you can do that as well.
Yeah, like when I get to some natural stops, like between slides and stuff like that, I can.
Perfect. All right, Alex, you want to give a little intro and then we can kick it over to Brian?
Hey, so quick intro, because I don't want to take away too much time from Brian. My name is Alex Sabio. I'm here in Southern California. I do have a W-2. I've been in healthcare for 19 years now. I'm a respiratory therapist. I absolutely love that job. I work with neonates and pediatrics. That's kind of my specialty. I've been investing in real estate since the mid 2000s, made a ton of mistakes. I started investing in single family homes, dabbled a little bit in multifamily syndications, and now I focus on short-term rentals. Absolutely love short-term rentals, but I love diversifying the portfolio. So if you guys have any questions, I love talking real estate, hit me up. Floor is yours, Brian, or Savannah. Let's hear Savannah's intro here.
Yeah, I know most of you guys. Savannah, I'm the admin of with Alex and the Healthcare Professionals Investing in Real Estate Facebook group, which I think is a reason a lot of you guys are here. Also go by the Net Worth Nurse, have that with Kai. He's here as well. He's one of my team members in Net Worth Nurse. We're growing that platform specifically for nurses. I invest primarily real estate syndications, got started similar to Alex. I love the nursing profession, but just kind of wanted a way to start growing wealth. Besides trading time for money, wanted to start making my money work for me. And so started investing in single family homes, then learned about real estate syndications. And since then I have been doing that primarily with a lot of healthcare professionals who are interested in investing passively. So, yeah, super stoked to be here and just really created this group to share resources and collab with a lot of you guys who can relate to healthcare and interest in real estate. So go ahead, welcome Brian.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind words. Now, what do I need to do to share my screen here? It's been a minute since I've done one of these. Do you see my slideshow here?
Not yet.
I think you just have to hit share screen on the bottom. There's a bottom button there. Share screen. Host disabled participant screen sharing.
Share screen here. I'll do it. I think I got it here. Just tell me when you guys see my PowerPoint.
Looks like it's moving. There we go.
I can see it.
Perfect.
Awesome.
So Brian Davis, you're going to see me with a couple hats written under. I work with an IRA administrator called AccuPlan, and they're custodian American Estate and Trust. I separately help set up some people with checkbook IRAs. That's why you see the retirement checkbook logo, and the independent IRA, that's me. I'm an independent agent for setting up self-directed IRAs and 401ks. And I'm going to go through that during this presentation. And for those that you were listening just a minute ago, please feel free to raise your hand. I'll do my best to answer questions coming through. And it's obviously at the end. So I'm going to go through a lot of just the basics here, and then we'll be able to open it up for specific questions and investment types. Make sure, there we go, starts moving. All right, that's a picture of me here, Brian Davis, Director of Business Development with AccuPlan. Independent IRA is my own brand, and I have a couple different websites here if you want to look up a little bit more about self-directed IRAs. A little bit about me. I'm originally from Northern California. My family farms rice and wild rice up north of Sacramento. I went to college in Santa Barbara, went to UC Santa Barbara, graduated there in 2001, moved down to San Diego beginning of 2002, and got into doing real estate loans, which I did real estate loans through 2007 when that market crashed. I was kind of looking for what I wanted to do next, because for those of you that were investing or in real estate back then, that was a tough time for everybody. I got into doing life insurance and health insurance for a year or two before stumbling across an opportunity doing self-directed IRAs and solo 401ks, which we'll talk about today. And just like most people, I had not even heard of this option prior to me doing this job when I started doing it in 2009. And in 2009, I was working for a different custodian, and I've been with the same IRA custodian, AccuPlan and American Estate and Trust, since 2012. One thing that I am not a financial advisor or broker dealer. I don't have any investment products myself. So please go out there and do your own due diligence. This is for informational purposes only. I can help with questions because I help people the whole way through, not just opening their account and funding their account. I walk them through their transaction. I just can't give investment advice. So I just wanted to clarify that. That's a difference in the self-directed IRA space versus financial planners. So financial planners are just going to put you in traditional investments, stocks, funds, mutual funds, where I'm going to be able to help open up the real estate basket, so to speak. So again, we administer self-directed IRA products and solo 401k plans. Solo 401ks, I'll get into a bit later. They're for the self-employed individual on earned income business, as long as they don't have any full-time W-2 employees besides themselves and a spouse. But we help with the IRA stuff and help answer all your questions before moving forward. Those of you that are out there, you're not alone if you had never heard about this or you've heard just a little bit about this. It is it's not necessarily a secret out there. It's just not something that everybody utilizes. So a lot of times attorneys and CPAs that you work with out there, they might know a little bit. Financial planners, they might know a little bit, but you need to come to somebody like me, whether that's me or somebody closer to you that that deals in the self-directed IRA space. There's probably about 20 to 25 companies across the country that do this. So they're not everywhere, and they generally work like me. They can work with anybody, anywhere in the world. So here's some statistics here. I just Googled this today. At the end of the second quarter of 2021, there are over $13 trillion in IRA assets. And that's not even including what's in 401k type plans. Less than 5% of that 13 trillion are in these self-directed investments. So are out there invested in things outside of the stock market, because brokerage houses, the Fidelities, the Schwabs, et cetera, they only specialize in securities, the stocks, bonds, mutual funds. They won't hold these investments, where I work with an IRA custodian called American Estate and Trust that will custody these things so you can hold them inside your IRA. And I'll get to how that looks here in a second. So what we're doing is opening up these asset classes that I have on the screen for you here. Most notably is real estate. And whether that is people buying direct real estate or investing in a syndication or notes and loans, I'd say that's the most common investment we see. Trust deed investments and investments into syndications. Real estate directly, we see it, just not as much. Probably saw that a bit more in the 2009 to 12 range, especially in California when the prices were down a little bit more. So we're going to be able to show you how, if you're wanting to, if you invest with personal funds in these things, to be able to do that with retirement accounts. And also, if you're somebody raising money, like Savannah's talking about here, how to know that $13 trillion is out there, that most of the time you'll find people, they're not sure exactly what their IRA accounts are doing. So these are just some options here of different investments that you can utilize with the self-directed IRA. You get people buying raw land banking as it's called, investing in LLCs, rental properties, joint ventures, promissory notes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The IRS doesn't necessarily have a list of what you can invest in, just what you can't invest in. And what they have deemed that is life insurance contracts and collectibles. So your IRA is not allowed to invest in those two things. So like a work of art, an antique, just as it says here. And they've even made some exceptions to certain gold coins. So you'll probably see the ads on late night TV, oh, invest in gold in your IRA. We do that too. My main focus has been real estate. And you'll even see some custodians now doing the cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, Ethereum, et cetera. Our custodian tried to do that for a while and our system was a little buggy, so we got out, but there are some IRA custodians that specialize in the cryptos if you're available. So you see there's some limitations here. So besides life insurance contracts and collectibles, there are certain things that the IRS deems is what's called a prohibited transaction. And I'll try not to use that jargon term too much, but essentially a prohibited transaction is when your IRA gets involved with somebody it's not supposed to. And who's not supposed to transact with your IRA? That's what we call a disqualified person. And a disqualified person would be yourself, spouse, and then you want to think of family members in lineal ascension and descension. So parents, grandparents, kids and their spouses, grandkids. It's kind of a straight line up and down your IRA cannot transact with. So for anybody out there, and I get asked this quite frequently, I want to buy a piece of real estate, have my college age kid rent it out for me or live in it, that's not allowed. So there are certain rules here, as well as you'll see this bottom bullet point here. If you or one of these disqualified persons own a company in which you are the majority owner, your IRA also is not allowed to invest there. So what does that look like? And I might have I see something in the chat box. I think that's just Savannah's info. Okay, so we're going to talk about, feel free to unmute yourself, at least a couple of you, not everybody has to. This is a lot easier to do in person as part of my presentation. But if anybody wants to play along with me, please go ahead. So everybody remembers Deal or No Deal that used to be on TV probably a decade ago now? So who wants to play? Savannah, do you want to play the game with me here?
Let's do it.
You're unmuted.
Yep.
So could your IRA lend yourself $10,000? Would that be a deal or no deal?
Oh my gosh.
So going through the previous slides, could you lend your own money? I see
Oh,
Alex wants to sign in.
Deal.
The answer is no deal. You are a disqualified person from your IRA, so you cannot loan yourself $10,000. How about the next one here? Can your IRA lend your brother $10,000? Deal or no deal?
No deal.
That one's deal.
Oh my God.
So
Oh, for two.
again, the side to side is okay, but you can't lend to your brother if he's going to turn around and lend it to you. The IRS considers that a no-no. And so, if they were to see that, they could go back and disqualify your IRA, which we'll discuss those here. This one's a little tricky. Your stepson, if you had a stepson, Savannah, could you lend your stepson $10,000? Deal or no deal?
Deal.
That one is deal. If it was your son, it would be no. Step is okay, apparently. Again, I don't make these rules. These rules were written in the ERISA laws in the early 70s. And that's what's allowed IRA custodians like us to be out there. These rules allow a custodian to hold these non-publicly traded investments. It's just a very small percentage of IRA custodians will hold them. And we'll get this last one going and we'll move forward to some more of the fun stuff. Okay, if you had a daughter-in-law, Savannah, could you lend them $10,000? Deal or no deal?
I'm going to say deal.
This one is no deal. And it's the children and their spouses. Step kids, apparently okay. Brothers, sisters, aunts, and uncles, they're okay to invest with, but it's that straight line kind of up and down. So it gets tricky. And this is where I tell people, if they have questions, email me, text me, call me, let me know what you're looking to do so we can see if these investments make sense. All right, so now we've talked about some of the stuff you can't do. how do we get this going? So the main thing is most people have an old 401k, an old IRA somewhere. How do I put money into a self-directed IRA? Well, we're IRA custodian, just as the big brokerage houses. We have the same type of IRAs, traditional IRAs, Roth IRAs, SEP IRAs. The difference being we just allow a different asset class to be invested in. In fact, currently, we do not have a platform for traditional investments, stocks, bonds, mutual funds. I'll generally tell people, leave their money at the Schwab or Fidelity, bring over to us what you're going to do with real estate. But it's just like any other IRA. If you had an IRA, let's say at a Fidelity, we would do what's called a trustee to trustee transfer, to transfer cash from that IRA at a Fidelity or Schwab or whoever it is over to the custodian with us. There's no tax implications for that. There's no penalties. You can move from one company to the other. I'm sure that every company's going to have some fees, but there's no tax implications or penalties from doing so. And if money's not in an IRA, a lot of times it's generally in an employer plan, an old 401k type plan, or a 403b or 457, or for the military, a TSP. So how you do that? It generally has to be your from a previous employer, and you're going to want to call and request a direct rollover to the IRA with our custodian. I've only seen this get messed up one time, and I'm still not sure how the client did it, or if it was the administrator at their 401k plan, but they sent the client the check, and then the client had to take 20% out federal withholdings before rolling it over to us. So they want to do a direct rollover where they write the check from the old 401 directly to the custodian and not to the client. And again, I've only seen that happen once, and I'm still not sure how that happened. But if you're in a current 401k plan, most likely you're not going to be able to roll over those dollars. There are some exceptions to that. A lot of plans allow, once somebody is 59 and a half, to do what's called an in-service rollover, meaning while they're still employed there, they're allowed to roll over a part of their 401k plan, but that's generally not until they're 59 and a half. And then some places still don't allow it. So that's one thing I get into is a frequently asked question a lot here. And the third and final way to move money into an IRA is through an annual contribution. And most people have a W-2 job and they don't have any self-employment income, and they fall in line of being able to make a traditional or Roth contribution, which, as you can see, isn't the largest. It's $6,000 a year. There is what's called a catch-up contribution for all these types of accounts. The IRS on a traditional and Roth IRA lets you throw in an extra $1,000. For some of the other plans, it's a bit more. We'll get there in a minute, specifically with the SEP IRA and the individual K or solo 401k plan. Now I'm going to look right here before we go to the next spot to see if there are any questions. I see people just asking there. So, okay, again, this is good. If anybody has any questions, feel free to write them in the chat box and we'll get to them there. So, get back here. Okay.
There was a question, Brian. So
Sure.
did you say you cannot roll over a 401k into an IRA?
You can, but not if it's with your current employer and you're under 59 and a half. If you're over 59 and a half with your current employer, you need to ask the plan administrator for what's called if the plan allows what's an in-service rollover. I'm just going to write that term in the chat box. That's what you would want to ask your plan administrator. All right, I see now I'm back in the chat box. I see another question. What's an individual K IRA? An individual K is a 401k plan for a self-employed business with one person. So it's a 401k plan, not an IRA. And I'm going to slowly transition into that 401k. So I might be answering the questions. So hold on, let's see. My CPA is saying that the government is trying to stop the use of self-directed IRA to buying real estate. And the answer, your CPA is keeping up with current events. So right now, you guys have probably seen in the House of Representatives and the Senate fighting over a new budget, like a $3.5 trillion budget. And one of the parts of the House and Means Committee in there was making some investments with self-directed IRAs not available. And we'll see where that legislation goes. To this point, that has not been enacted, but that is something that is being currently looked at. So thank you for that question. And that's an important thing going on right now, to see whether they are going to keep allowing syndications being allowed to invest in using IRAs. But right now they are. There's a strong feeling in the community that that part, those 3 sentences, I think it's about 50 words of, pages that are this big. So we'll see what happens there. I'm holding out hope things will go in the positive direction. I think we get one more chat there. Does anything change if you have a Roth IRA? No, we have Roth IRAs as well. If you're 70, there's one more question in the chat box here before I'll move forward. If you're 71 years old and required to start withdrawing from a 457, can you roll it over to a self-directed IRA and void that requirement? You're going to need to ask the plan administrator for the 457. I think it's Melissa, if you're going to be able to roll that over. So you're going to want to ask them if you can do an in-service rollover, as I put in that language in the chat box before. So I'll start moving forward and get to questions again as they come. But we make it fairly simple to get started for those. You can open up an account online. In fact, I'll show you my screen here. If I have it here, there it is. You open your account application with us online through this link, and you can get your account open with us in a matter of minutes. And then I would work with you on funding that investment. Let's say it's a syndication type of investment, like what Savannah offers. We would need to see the operating agreement of the LLC or limited partnership. If there's a subscription agreement, we want to see that. We want to make sure that the IRA is correctly vested on the documents. So instead of it being my name, just Brian Davis as the investor, it would be Brian Davis via legal owner via non-trust custodial IRA with AET, which is AET is our custodian out of Las Vegas. And it would use that Las Vegas address, and it's going to use the taxpayer ID or EIN number for the IRA. And then that asset would be held in your IRA. And I walk people through this the whole way through. So I don't just help people open their accounts and fund their accounts. I help them through their investments and questions they have through that. And if it's a note, for instance, like a hard money loan, we just need a copy of the note and the deed of trust and wire instructions. So it's a fairly simple process. And we have a form of ours called a bi-direction letter, which you see it says direction letter here on how we get that through. This is what comes up a lot. I want to buy a piece of real estate, or I want to buy into this note. I don't have enough money. How do I do that? Well, you can partner with yourself or other people. You can borrow money from a non-recourse lender. So if you buy direct real estate with a retirement account, your IRA can get a loan. It just has to be from a non-recourse lender, which are not going to be your traditional lenders. They only lend 50, 65%, and their rates are in the 5s. So it's a different loan. They're lending money to the IRA. It's not based off of your credit. In fact, you're not even allowed to personally guarantee the loan. So there's some rules there. If anybody gets a little bit deeper in that wants to talk to me about that, that's something you can do. You can partner with other people. Again, the loan, and those are some of the things. Some people set up checkbook IRAs utilizing either an LLC or a trust. We can talk about that. That's another thing that the government's looking at too, are these IRA-owned entities. But again, we're feeling pretty positive that those things are going to go through. And then the solo 401k, which we talked about earlier. And my custodian, AccuPlan and American Estate and Trust, we call ours a 1K. So it's a one participant plan. It's for self-employed people that have an earned income business. Doesn't matter if they're sole proprietor or they're set up as a corporation or LLC, it works either way. So it's a 401k plan versus an IRA, just like if you're a W-2 employee at a company or some other employer plan that has a similar type of plan than a 401. There's just some benefits on these, what they call a one participant plan. And it even works if there is a spouse, they count that as one participant if it's a spouse. And people are allowed to roll over retirement funds into that, pre-tax retirement funds. and just like the IRA, and then start investing from there. 401k plans, you can contribute a lot more to it. If you're under 50, you can contribute potentially up to $58,000 a year. If you are over 50, there's an extra $6,500 contribution that you can potentially make a year to put that at $64,500. And if this is, and I've seen this frequently, husband and wife, spouses having one business together, each of them can potentially put this much into it. There's a Roth feature to the 401k plan. So I didn't go into too many specifics about the tax difference between a Roth and a traditional IRA or pre-tax retirement funds versus Roth. When you put money in a pre-tax IRA, like a traditional IRA, you're putting money in pre-tax. So you're getting a write-off when you're making that contribution, whether that's out of pay through an employer plan or making an annual contribution, and the funds grow tax deferred. When you take them out at retirement, it counts as earned income for you there. With a Roth IRA, you're not getting a deduction when you make a Roth contribution now, but it grows tax-free. So when you do retire, those funds come out tax-free. So that's in the 401k plan has two ways you make contribution. One is the employee and one is the company match, even though you're both the employee and employer. So I can get into specifics here in a second if people want, but one big thing I do want to point out, there's the Roth option here. So you can make Roth contributions that are larger than a Roth IRA. You can also loan yourself money from the plan. That's different than an IRA. We just went through those prohibited transactions where you cannot loan yourself money. With the 401k plan though, you're allowed to loan yourself up to 50% of plan assets with a cap at $50,000. So if you had a deal that you didn't quite have enough funds from, and you wanted to get the IRA involved, that might be the easiest route besides investing directly with the retirement account. And again, we can go over that. There's on how you pay that back, et cetera. And one of the things I kind of glanced over on the last screen, if your IRA is buying direct real estate or it's invested into syndication, and the syndication is utilizing leverage to buy real estate, there's a potential tax to your IRA. And you'll hear it called UBIT, unrelated business income tax, but it's specifically, there's a tax law that's part of UBIT called UDFI. And I'll try to stop with the jargon, I swear. UDFI stands for unrelated debt financed income, meaning however much percentage of debt financing you used, that percentage of your earnings are subject to a tax. So let's say you bought a property for $100,000, you had $60,000 in IRA funds, you got a loan for $40,000. So in that example I give, 40% is debt financed. So in that example, 40% then of your net proceeds, not gross, are subject to a tax. The 401k plan is exempt from that specific tax. So when people start talking about solo Ks or Roth solo 401ks, if you're doing real estate type of investments, there's a real big benefit versus doing it in an IRA. Again, contribution limits, you can make a contribution as the employee of up to $19,500 a year. And that can go in pre-tax where you get a tax write-off for it, or it can be a Roth contribution. And depending on how you pay yourself, if you're self-employed, I can go through that with people, whether you're W-2 or your LLC where your Schedule C income. And people want to talk to me about that specifically, we can go into that later. But it's very easy. You don't have to have an LLC or corporation. You can do this as a sole proprietor. We create the 401k for you and help you roll over funds, and then you're off and investing there. So that's a lot of my presentation there. The rest I'm going to dedicate to specific questions you guys might have. And with that, I'll leave that screen up here. And if anybody has any questions, please jump in now.
Can you invest in life insurance with the 401k, the solo 401k?
That is a great question. I think there's some very specific ways, but I believe it's just for yourself and the other people that are part of the business. But I would want to I would double check with the CPA on that. I have never seen anybody do that. Generally, people that are working with me, they're not setting these up for life insurance or stocks and bonds investments. It's for real estate type of investment. So I think there are some guidelines that you can have one of the owners of the company or a highly compensated employee of the 401k plan say that the plan can buy it, but I haven't dealt with it in practice, so I don't want to jump too far in the weeds on that question.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Let's see here. IRA. Does income received from your investments have to go back into the IRA or 401k? The answer is yes. So the IRA, if the IRA made the investments, everything goes back to the IRA, tax deferred or tax free if it's a Roth IRA. The only way money goes to you would be after it goes back into the IRA and then you wanted to take a distribution, let's say. So you can't take a distribution from these. It's just the ordering on which you do it has to be right. You can't take it from the investment and have the investment pay you. It has to go through the IRA, and if you want the funds, take it as a distribution. I hope that makes sense. Okay, here's a question in here. When you lend money from your IRA, when do you have to pay it back before you get penalized? So I'll answer this a couple ways. So the 401, if you're talking about the 401k plan loan, which you can loan just yourself money of up to $50,000. So I talked to a couple slides back. You have to pay your 401k plan back, and a lot of major 401k plans have this. So a lot of you W-2 earners out there probably have maybe even taken a 401k loan, but this plan allows you to take that up to $50,000 or 50% of plan assets with the cap at 50, and the rate on it is either prime +1 or prime +2. There's not a direct answer to that question out there. You'll see some places say prime +1 and some prime +2. We recommend prime +2, but I think prime +1 is fine. And the longest you can loan that money out to yourself is over a 5-year period. And you have to pay yourself back a minimum of quarterly. And again, I'm being very specific here on the solo 401k plan participant loan. If you are utilizing your retirement account, your 401k plan, or your IRA to loan third parties money, you can have that money going out there as long as you want, as long as you make term under what makes sense. My custodian has some specific requirements, but these aren't IRS rules. This is just my custodian's rules. So they'll let people do secured loans and unsecured loans. They want to make sure that the rate on the loan is not too low, like it looks like you're giving a buddy deal. So if you're giving somebody a loan under 5.5%, we're actually going to look at it funny. So we'll want to see a larger rate of return. And the custodian also requires at least an annual payment back to the IRA. But you could have that term with your borrower, as long as it's a, not a disqualified person borrower. You can have that term out there for years. I generally see them shorter term, but you can have 5, 10-year, 20-year loans out there, as long as that makes sense for everybody involved. So there's no IRS rule on the terms of the length of the retirement account, but different custodians might have different rules about payback. So my custodian requires at least one payment if the term is over a year long. Let's see, I know we got some more questions that popped in while I was answering that. Can you only contribute to your solo 401k with self-employment income? Yes, on annual contributions, but you are allowed to roll over any pre-tax retirement accounts into that 401k. So any traditional or SEP IRAs can be rolled in. Roth IRAs cannot be rolled into the Roth component of the 401k plan because there are some specific Roth ordering rules that CPAs have told me a million times how that works, but I still don't have it fully in my head. It's a no. Once it's out into a Roth IRA, it can't. But if you close down your 401k plan, the Roth money would go to a Roth IRA. Let's see here. We've got some more questions. Does income received from investments go back in? Yes, I answered that. When you lend money from your IRA, when do you have to pay it back? You don't. That's the asset in your IRA is that loan, where your IRA is basically the bank. Answered that. What are the benefits of investing in real estate with a solo 401k versus not contributing and using money directly to buy real estate, for example? So good question. If you're buying direct real estate inside your IRA, you're keeping those dollars tax deferred or tax free versus taking a big distribution from your retirement account and then buying it in your IRA. So let's just say you're buying a property for $250,000. If you decided to take that out as a distribution from your IRA, that's, unless it's a Roth, that's going to be a $250,000 that's going to count as earned income. And that's going to be a major tax hit for pretty much anybody. And then if you're under 59 and a half, there's a penalty for early withdrawal as well of an extra 10%. So if you want to keep it in the IRA and keep those funds tax deferred, you'd want to move to a custodian like us. The one major difference between investing personal funds using IRA dollars and direct real estate is you don't have all the write-offs. When you do it personally, you have all these write-offs because of all the taxable situations. Well, when you're buying it in a tax deferred or tax-free vehicle, there's nothing to write off. It's already tax deferred or tax free. So there's not those big benefits so that would be the negative of buying with an IRA. So I've had some people that were closer to 72 when you're required to start taking distributions, that it made more sense for them at 72 to take the distribution because they weren't working as much then, and then buy the real estate, because it gets a little complex once you have to start taking distributions at age 72. All right, here's some more questions. If I put my property under an LLC under my wife, can she use the cash flow from the property to contribute to a solo 401k, even if it's W-2? So great question. So the solo 401k is for an earned income business versus, I'm assuming that if you have a property in an LLC, you're talking about rental income, that's considered passive income. So this would be more of a question on eligibility for a 401k plan, which most likely that your wife would not be able to, if I'm understanding this question correctly. So the annual contributions are based off earned income business, not passive income business. And again, when I put somebody and potentially putting somebody in a solo 401k, I set up a 3-way call with their CPA and myself, make sure we're all on the same page, because I have had people go, no, I got this self-employed business. And I find out later they had 3 other businesses with employees, and then you'd have to offer it to them, and it gets a bit of a mess. So these 401ks for alternative assets, they're meant to be these one participant plans. It gets dirty, so to speak, if there's more than one member. The distributions you mentioned, are they subject to IRS penalty for early withdrawal? If you're talking about annual contributions to the IRAs, yes. Roth IRAs are a little bit different. You can take a withdrawal from what you've contributed. But yes, distributions are subject to IRA penalty with early withdrawal if you're under 59 and a half. Let's see, what's the most rate that can be charged on a loan to somebody? You're gonna have to follow your local not hard money. What's the term I'm looking for loans there? You're gonna have to look at your state's guidelines for loans there. But we very often are seeing 10, 12% plus. That's pretty common, especially for hard money lenders. And a lot of hard money lenders, they fractionalize their trust deed for easier investments. Next question. I'm trying to fly through these as best, but people are having some good ones in here. When you take money out from your 401k or 403b, how big of an effect does it make when you do your taxes? Well, if you're rolling over those funds to an IRA, it's not going to do anything to your taxes. That's why, you'll see the commercials on TV, roll your money over to an IRA with E-Trade. There's no tax consequence for doing so. When you take it as a distribution to yourself, so you take the money directly and not put it in an IRA, that counts as earned income for you for that year. And so that's going to have a tax hit for you depending on your your income situation, and also whether you were 59.5 or not. All right, next question. Where does the interest payments go to when paying back your monies borrowed from a 401k? It goes back into your 401k plan. So basically you're paying yourself back with interest. So that's why a lot of times it makes sense, because you're still growing your retirement account. You're just paying it instead of paying a third party. But I see most people that do this, they invest with their IRA or 401k dollars in investments. They invest personally in investments, and a lot of times they'll use that loan just to bump up maybe one of their personal investments, stuff like that. That's what I see the most. All right, here's a question from somebody in here in the group. If I loan my brother money from my self-directed IRA and he utilizes those funds to purchase real estate, can he still add me to title on that purchase? And Felicia, I would say do not do that. You do not want your name associated with that, because you, out of your IRA, you loaned your brother some funds. If you were to get audited, they could potentially disqualify your IRA as of January 1st of the year that you did that, if you were somehow personally benefiting in that scenario. So to clarify that, Felicia, if you're going to get a personal benefit, let's say you wanted to be the broker on your brother's loan and make a commission, if you're a real estate agent, and you were to get a benefit from that, that would not be allowed under IRS guidelines. So you want to stay away from any personal benefits from the retirement account investment, as well as if any of those disqualified persons have a personal benefit. So that's kind of the smell test. And again, when people do get these with me, I do my best to answer questions when they're facing a scenario like that. Let's see, I might have skipped something on accident. Thank you. Do I still get all the tax benefits when I do a cost segregation if I purchase a property with an IRA? Alex, the answer to that is generally no, because you're using this tax deferred or tax-free vehicle. You're not going to get those personal exceptions. So it's very similar answer there. All right, I think I ran low for a second of questions. Does anybody else have a question? I'm going to go back to.
I know you answered this question already, but just want to make sure. When it comes to the 401k, say I leave my W-2 employer and decide to do my own business, short-term rentals, can I roll that over into an existing 401k?
Yes.
Or self-directed?
Yes, you can. It can be moved over to a 401k plan or an IRA account. So yes, the short answer is definitely yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else?
So Brian, this is a question I get a lot, and a lot of this gets brought up when I'm having conversations with people about real estate syndications and investing passively in these apartment type deals, real estate syndication deals, is people think, oh, I don't have the money to do that. And then I say, okay, well, do you have a 401k or an IRA? Most nurses and healthcare professionals have worked at different hospitals and different companies. And when you leave a company, if you had a 401k there, you can roll that into an IRA and then roll it easily into a self-directed IRA. And then you can invest in these deals. What, like, in your experience, is the fee structure? Because that's usually one of the biggest questions I get is like, okay, well, what are the fees associated with that?
I'm going to go back to sharing my screen then and pull up our fee schedule and do it that way. I had this pulled up for a reason. So this is my custodian's fee schedule. And I would say we're not the lowest and we're definitely not the highest. I'd say we're in probably the middle of the road, maybe a little bit on the lower end. But the basics of our fee structure is a $350 annual fee, a $50 setup fee, and then we charge $9.95 every time money comes in or out of the account for a transaction fee. And then it's, wires, and we charge a $33.95 wire fee, incoming or outgoing. That's the basics of it. Most of these things don't really pop up, to be honest with you. And all of our fees can come out of retirement funds, or you can pay them separately. Meaning we can invoice you and you can pay via, credit card or ACH from your bank account, or write us a check. So these are the fees from the IRA. And again, you can pay those out of IRA funds or invoice you separately. So let's just say my most common thing I see, Savannah and everybody else, somebody that has an offering, syndication that has an offering, they'll refer me over a client. Their client will set up, and let's just say they're going to do a $50,000 investment in the syndication. They'll bring over a little bit over 50,000. I'll help them walk through the investment, and then they'll leave enough money in their account to pay for fees for a couple of years. And the client's really going to look at that first year fee of basically $400 plus the transaction fee of money coming in from the old 401k or other IRA, and then wire fees. So they're looking, under $500 year one, and most likely $350 ongoing. And again, most people have it come out of their retirement funds, but a lot of people pay it themselves. I think depending on how you get taxed, you might be able to write those fees off, but it might depend on how you like itemize deductions and stuff like that. And again, I think I already showed you guys, you open an account online with us, and then we help walk people through this transfer request form if it's with another IRA. It's how we request funds from another IRA. And then I walk people through the investment process as well. It's simple. I do this myself. Again, I've been doing this since 2009. I started doing hard money loans basically out of my solo 401k and my Roth IRA. And I've been doing that probably since 2012, about 9 years that I've been doing some different investments myself. So I also practice what I preach. So I've done some stuff too for people with questions.
Yeah, this is an amazing strategy for anyone who does have a 401k sitting there from a previous employer, or just an IRA that's sitting there collecting, like I think historically since the beginning, like 5 to 7% on average annual, like that's what it collects. And these real estate syndications are collecting, they're paying out 15 to 20% average annualized return. So you can really double or triple your money by taking that money and just diverting it into a different investment strategy. Real estate syndications are very, very powerful. And I've had many people invest in my syndication deals specifically through their IRA accounts. And it is a very easy process. It is exactly like Brian is saying. I just send them the legal documents. They send it over to their custodian, and then very easily that money is transitioned over into the investment. And then all the payouts from the investment go back directly into the IRA.
Exactly. You couldn't have said it easier and more straightforward than I could have. It's a real simple process. I generally have a copy, if it's somebody I've worked with on a syndication, I've worked with more than one client, I generally have the template. I have the operating agreement. I have everything, when we just need the subscription agreement updated with that investor's info on it. And I generally pre-fill those out for clients to help them out and just be like, all right, here's this. We have a form of ours similar to this transfer form called a direction of investment form, where you direct us to invest X amount of dollars into company Y. And that's it. We can generally fund those investments if the money's in the account with us in one day, sometimes 2 days if it's a larger investment that we take an extra peek at. We got a couple other questions that popped in here. Savannah, you want me to read those?
Yep, go for it.
So we have, let's see, what can I expect when I do my taxes after I withdraw from my 401k to purchase a property? So tax-wise, Norris, it's your question. You would roll up money over to an IRA with a custodian like us, and then we'd buy it inside your IRA. So there wouldn't be anything you would have to do with your taxes outside of letting your CPA know you have an IRA with our custodian. But the IRA custodians, us and my competitors out there, we do the tax reporting for your IRA, just like the Fidelities and Schwabs do. We as custodian report a tax form called a 5498. to the IRS every year, letting them know the value of your IRA. So you wouldn't, if you're buying that property and you don't get a loan, you're not going to be responsible for any taxes. But if you do get a loan, like we talked about, that you're borrowing money, like a non-recourse loan, you'll have to figure that the taxes for that. That would be the only thing you'd have to worry about. Here's another question from Jordan. If you have an LLC with earned income, you can put that money into an IRA. As the LLC owner and only employee, can I do a match to increase the amount per year? The answer to Jordan is yes. So let's say you're a one-member LLC, and how you make contributions is based off of your income. And it depends whether your LLC is taxed as a corporation or if it's Schedule C income on how you make that contribution. But Jordan, if you have a question about that, please email me and I'll go through exactly how that works per call. I just want to get to all these questions. I know that 7 p.m. is slowly creeping up on us here. Let's see. How does my IRA grow? With my job, there's a match, but a self-directed IRA isn't correct. So just like your IRA, if you had an IRA from an old 401k that you rolled over to Fidelity and Schwab, E-Trade, what have you, you're only really using that for growth in investments. So how you're growing it is by the returns you're getting. So if Savannah has an offering and a syndication that pays 15, 20%, that's where you're getting your growth. The growth isn't from contributions unless you just want to make annual contributions. So I hope that answers that question. JC writes, if someone is making payments on a loan to the IRA, is each payment considered a transaction? Would that be charged with your transaction fee? So yes, our $9.95 transaction fee is for all incoming or outgoing transactions. We got some thank yous and thumbs up to Savannah for getting stuff going here, and I'll second that. Thank you, Savannah, for offering this tonight. Here's another one. I have a Roth and a traditional IRA. Should I transfer the traditional into the Roth, and would that be beneficial now? So what Felicia is asking, should she move her money from pre-tax retirement account to the Roth? And the answer to that question is a big fat maybe. You should talk to your CPA about what makes sense for you. I see a lot of people, they will strategically do what's called a Roth conversion and convert over parts of their Roth IRA, or traditional IRA, to the Roth. There's a tax consequence when you do so. Basically, it counts as earned income on however much you convert from your traditional to a Roth. So a lot of people strategize with your CPAs about just getting to the end of whatever tax bracket they're in. But that's more of a CPA question than me, but you can definitely do that with self-directed IRAs as well. Let's see here. Looks like somebody has an old 401k at one of the major 401k holders, Voya. If I transfer them to another type of IRA, do I pay tax to roll over? So no, you wouldn't have to pay tax if you're rolling over those funds to an IRA, whether it's self-directed or otherwise. All right, I think I caught up with the questions. We got 5 minutes to go. Savannah, any last frequently asked questions you might have that you might want me to address here?
Really exactly like what Jenny said. And I was just texting with one of my friends before I hopped on this call and was encouraging him to come, because usually when you leave a company, that money is just sitting in that 401k. You don't even realize it's not going to transfer itself. No one tells you what to do with it. No one tells you there's other options. You just think, okay, I left that employer, that was over in Fidelity. Now I'm over in Ameritrade. I still have this 401k just sitting there, not doing anything. Yes,
I think
you can
roll
that over.
Yeah, the best practice is to roll it over to any IRA.
Yes.
And I would say, if you don't exactly know what you're going to do, take it to a brokerage house where they're going to have some cheap, at least money market options for you. Our custodian, it's not a place where people just want to bring over a bunch of sitting cash because it doesn't make any money. People generally utilize us. Okay, I'm going to do an investment in real estate in this space. I want to make sure it's ready. Because it can take anywhere from a couple days to a couple weeks to get the money from wherever it currently is. If it's in an IRA, a lot of times we can have them wire us the money directly, and if it's like a Fidelity or Schwab, we can generally get that money in a couple days. If it's in an old 401 type plan, they always send out checks. And so then you got to wait for a check to get mailed, and they might mail it to you, the client, they might mail it to our custodian in Vegas. Either way, it's got to get to Vegas. And then when we get it, there's a week hold on it. So you just got to plan accordingly depending on what you're investing, how you're investing. But I'd recommend anybody just move it to an IRA. It doesn't have to be self-directed. The self-directed is really just to open up these other investment classes, the real estate, the syndications, precious metals, et cetera. That's where we thrive. I mean, that's why we're here. We complement those brokerage houses and their IRAs.
Yeah. So if you have ever worked at another job and you have an old 401k, I highly encourage you to look at it, hop on the call with the custodian who it's with. Like I had this up, I was working with Sutter Health up in NorCal, moved down to SoCal, working with Providence, called Fidelity. I'm like, what do I do with this old 401k? They're like, oh, you can roll it over into an IRA, rolled it over into an IRA, then used it to invest in real estate. So there's a lot of people who don't even realize that you have this huge opportunity to invest in real estate just sitting in your retirement account. So any of you guys where that scenario is applicable to you, I would encourage you hop on your custodian, see how easy it is to switch over into an IRA. Then you can hit up someone like Brian Davis, get it over into a self-directed IRA. Then you can start investing in real estate syndications now, really. I mean, it is that easy.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly it. And if anybody didn't, have a question that they thought of right now, you can reach me, Brian, at independentira.com, or find me on one of my websites there, or just give me a call. So thank you very much, Savannah, for putting this together. And Alex, it sounds like you're highly involved here in the group. Thank you guys for having me. Greatly appreciate it. And I shared my PowerPoint presentation with Savannah. So Savannah, feel free to share that with anybody and everybody on the call.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you so much, Brian, for coming here. You got a lot of questions answered. I love it. People are very engaged in this topic. I think it's very applicable to a lot of people. I will post this up onto YouTube and then I'll share it with our Facebook group and then I can share the PowerPoint as well. Alex, do you want to touch on briefly what we have going next week?
Next week, we got the hot topic of short-term rentals. I will be speaking my experience within 1 year of investing in short-term rentals. I'll show you how I have selected my markets, and I'll kind of show you how to automate some of the stuff. What we'll do is we'll create a link soon, and please feel free to share it to as many people as you'd like. So.
Awesome. Thank you guys all so much for coming. I know you guys are all eager to get off to go watch the Dodger game going on right now. So see you later. See you next
Dodgers.
Week. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.